The alarm system screamed across Guardian 7, the largest defense station orbiting Earth. Commander Hyun Tai jumped from his chair and stared at the screens. Something massive had just appeared at the edge of human space. Not one ship, not 10 ships, hundreds of them. His hands moved quickly across the control panel. All stations, battle ready, now. But then something strange happened. The ships did not attack. Instead, they sent a message. A peaceful message. The voice that came through the speakers was soft and gentle, speaking perfect English. People of Earth, we come in peace. We need your help. Hyun Tai had trained for war his entire life. He had prepared for invasion, for battles in space, for defending his home. He had not prepared for aliens begging for help. The alien ships were beautiful. They looked like floating crystals, shining with colors that humans had no names for. Each ship was the size of a small city. They did not carry weapons on the outside. They did not move like warships. They moved slowly, carefully, like someone afraid of being hurt. Within hours, the United Earth Council called an emergency meeting. Captain Bina Kang received orders to meet the alien delegation. She was a diplomat, not a soldier. She had spent 20 years learning how to talk to aliens, how to understand different cultures, how to make peace. She traveled to the lead ship in a small shuttle. When she stepped inside, she gasped. The walls were made of living crystal that sang soft music. The air smelled like flowers she had never seen. Everything was gentle and beautiful. The alien ambassador waited for her in a large room. It called itself Torvastine. It looked like a tall sculpture made of blue and green crystal. Light moved inside its body like water. When it spoke, its voice filled the room with warmth. Captain Bina Kang, thank you for meeting with us. We have waited so long to speak with humanity. Bina bowed slightly. We are honored by your visit. Your message said you need help. What kind of help? Torvastine's light dimmed. The crystal body seemed to shrink a little. We need warriors. We need soldiers. We need someone who can fight. Bina felt confused. But your people seem so advanced. Your ships are amazing. Your technology is beyond ours. Why do you need us? The ambassador moved to a wall. The crystal became like a window showing images. Bina saw worlds burning. She saw cities being torn apart. She saw creatures that looked like nightmares, all teeth and claws and hunger. Millions of them, maybe billions, covering entire planets like a disease. These are the Ravagers, Torvastine said quietly. They have destroyed 12 civilizations. They are coming for us next. We tried to negotiate with them. We offered them resources, technology, entire worlds. They only want one thing. They want to consume everything alive. Bina watched the images. She saw alien children running from the monsters. She saw families torn apart. She saw entire species wiped out in days. Her hands became fists. How long have you been fighting them? She asked. 300 years. 300 years. And you have not stopped them? Torvastine's light flickered like someone crying. Captain, you do not understand. My people are not warriors. None of the species in the Viridian Collective are warriors. We are artists. We are scientists. We build beautiful things. We create music and stories. We have studied war, but we do not understand it in our hearts. Every battle we fight, we lose more than ships. We lose our souls. The ambassador turned to face her directly. We studied your people for decades before coming here. We watched your world. We saw your art, your museums, your concerts. We saw people who love peace, who create beautiful things, who care for each other. We thought we would find kindred spirits. Bina nodded slowly. But now you need something else. Yes, we need what we do not have. We need warriors who can face the darkness and not break. We need fighters who can stop the Ravagers before they consume the entire galaxy. We have the technology. We have the resources. But we do not have the will to do what must be done. They talked for hours. Torvastine showed her everything. Battle reports from 3 centuries of losing. Tactical data that proved the Ravagers could not be reasoned with. Records of diplomatic attempts that ended in slaughter. By the time Bina returned to her shuttle, she knew the truth. The Viridians were not lying. They were desperate. She reported to the United Earth Council at Luna Station. The huge meeting hall filled with representatives from every nation, every colony, every corner of human civilization. Chancellor Day 1 listened to her report in silence. When she finished, the room erupted in argument. Some wanted to help immediately. Some wanted to stay out of alien wars. Some worried about the cost. Some worried about the danger. They argued for 3 days. On the fourth day, Chancellor Daewon called for silence. He was an old man, with white hair and scars on his hands from the colonial rebellion 40 years ago. He had fought in real battles. He had seen real war. The Viridians came to us seeking shelter, he said. They came looking for artists and philosophers and builders. They studied our last 300 years and thought we were a peaceful species. He paused. They were wrong. He looked around the room at every face. We are artists. We are philosophers. We are builders. But we are also warriors. We have always been warriors. And when someone threatens those who cannot defend themselves, we do not hide. We do not run. We fight! He turned to face the viewing screen that showed the Viridian fleet waiting in orbit. Send them this message. You came seeking peace. You will leave with warriors instead. Not because we love war, but because we refuse to let innocents die when we have the power to protect them.
Humanity will answer your plea.
We will stand with you. And the Ravagers will learn what happens when they threaten our neighbors. The vote was unanimous. Within hours, military bases across Earth, Mars, Luna, and the outer colonies began to mobilize. Ships that had been in storage for decades started powering up. Soldiers who had only trained for theoretical wars received real deployment orders. The machinery of human warfare, built over thousands of years of history, began to move. Torvastine received the message in the crystal ship. The ambassador read it 3 times, trying to understand. The Viridians had come seeking refuge. Instead, humanity was preparing for war. On their behalf, the ambassador did not know whether to feel hope or fear. Perhaps both. Far away in the dark between stars, the Ravagers sensed new prey. They began to move toward human space, hungry and confident. They had consumed 12 civilizations. One more would be easy. They had no idea what was coming for them. The Viridian observers stood in the briefing room at Mars War College, their crystal bodies reflecting the red light from the planet below. They had come to understand what humanity was offering. What they saw confused and frightened them. Colonel Jin Woo stood at the front of the room. He was a short man with gray hair and calm eyes. He had taught military history for 30 years. He pressed a button and the wall behind him lit up with images. This is the Battle of Thermopylae, he said. 300 soldiers held a mountain pass against an army of hundreds of thousands. They all died. But they bought time for their people to prepare. That was 2,500 years ago. The images changed. Battles flashed across the screen. Thousands of them, tens of thousands. Humans fighting with spears, with swords, with guns, with tanks, with ships. Humans fighting each other, fighting nature, fighting anything that threatened them. Torvastine watched in growing horror. This is all from your history? Yes, Jinwoo said simply. This is what we are. This is what we have always been. The colonel showed them the world wars. Millions dead in trenches, cities burning from bombs, entire nations throwing everything they had into destruction. He showed them the nuclear weapons, the chemical weapons, the biological weapons. He showed them what humans did to each other when they believed their survival was at stake. One of the younger Viridian observers, a being named Kelsina, spoke up. But we saw your museums, your art, your music, your poetry. You are a cultured species. How can this also be true? Colonel Jinwoo smiled sadly. That is what you did not understand. We create beauty because we know destruction so well. We write poetry because we have seen horror. We make art to cope with what we are capable of doing. Our culture exists because of our capacity for violence, not in spite of it. He changed the image to show a painting. It showed a soldier in a muddy trench holding a letter from home. The painting was beautiful and heartbreaking. A soldier painted this during the First World War, Jinwoo said. He survived 4 years of hell. He saw his friends die in mud and gas and fire, and when he came home he painted beauty. Because humans need beauty to balance the darkness we carry inside us. The Viridians did not speak. They simply watched as more images appeared. Human history laid out in blood and art, destruction and creation, war and peace, all mixed together in ways they could not separate. Admiral Hana Lim entered the room. She was tall and strong, with short black hair and 3 scars across her left arm. She had fought in the colonial rebellion. She had seen real combat. Colonel, thank you, she said. I will take them from here. She led the Viridians to another room. This one had no windows. The walls were covered in screens showing star maps, fleet positions, weapon specifications. It looked like a war room. Because it was. The Viridians made a mistake, Hana said bluntly. You studied humanity for decades. You watched our culture. You saw what we are now, but you did not understand our past, and you did not see what we were preparing for. She pressed a button. The screen showed massive shipyards in orbit around Mars, hundreds of warships under construction. Some were finished. Some were half-built. All of them were designed for one purpose: war in space. When did you start building these? Torvastine asked quietly. 200 years ago, right after we met our first aliens. But those aliens were peaceful traders. Hana nodded. Yes, they were. But we asked ourselves a question. What if the next ones are not peaceful? What if someone comes who wants to hurt us? What if we meet a species that only understands violence? She showed them more images. Training facilities on Luna, weapon research labs on Europa, Marine battalions practicing zero-gravity combat in the asteroid belt. Everything had been prepared. Everything had been waiting. You were ready for war, Kelsine said. Even though you had no enemies. We were ready, Hana agreed. Because humans learned long ago that peace is not the natural state of the universe. Peace is what you build and defend, and if you want peace, you must be ready for war. She pulled up files on her screen. After you contacted us, we did our own research. We looked at the Ravagers. We studied every battle you fought against them. We analyzed their tactics, their biology, their weaknesses. Do you know what we found? The Viridians waited. They are not unbeatable. They are just fighting people who do not know how to fight back. They use fear as a weapon. They broadcast the screams of the dying. They destroy slowly to break your spirit. They are predators, and predators rely on prey being afraid. Hana's smile was cold. Humans are not prey. We stopped being prey 300,000 years ago, when we picked up the first sharp stick and decided to fight back against things bigger and stronger than us. We have been apex predators on our own world for our entire existence. The Ravagers are about to learn what that means. Major Suji Park joined them. She was a psychologist who worked with combat units. She studied how soldiers think, how they handle fear, how they survive trauma. The Viridians are confused, she said to Hana. They cannot understand how we can be both kind and violent, how we can create art and also create weapons, how we can love peace and also be good at war. She turned to Torvastine. You saw our museums. Did you see what was in them? Art, history, culture. Did you see the war memorials? The monuments to our dead? The walls covered with names of soldiers who gave their lives? Torvastine's light dimmed. Yes, we thought they were sad reminders of your violent past. We thought you had moved beyond that. Suji shook her head. We built those memorials to remember. Because humans who forget the cost of war are doomed to repeat it. We honor our warriors not because we love war, but because we understand sacrifice. Those soldiers died so others could live in peace. That is what warriors do. That is what we have always done. She showed them human literature, not the gentle poetry or beautiful paintings. She showed them the Iliad, the story of Achilles and Hector fighting before the walls of Troy. She showed them the records of Genghis Khan, who built an empire through conquest. She showed them accounts of samurai, of knights, of Spartans, of every warrior culture that had ever existed on Earth. You studied our last 300 years, Suji said. But humans have been warriors for 300,000 years. It is not what we do, it is what we are. It is coded into our DNA, written in our history, carried in every story we tell our children. Outside, the first warships began launching from Earth orbit. The United Earth Fleet was assembling. 127 ships, 40,000 soldiers, pilots, marines, and crew, support vessels carrying ammunition, supplies, medical equipment, everything needed for a campaign in deep space. Torvastine and the other Viridians watched from the observation deck. The human warships did not look like Viridian ships. They were not beautiful or artistic. They were hard angles and thick armor and weapons bristling from every surface. They looked like what they were, tools designed to kill. Are all of these for us? Kelson asked. Captain Binna Kang stood beside them. These are for the Ravagers. We are going to find them. We are going to fight them. And we are going to teach them something they have never learned before. What is that? Binna looked out at the fleet with pride. That there are some species in this universe that you should never threaten. Some species that will not run. Some species that will fight back with everything they have. The Ravagers have spent 300 years consuming prey. Now they are going to meet predators. The flagship of the fleet, the UES Indomitable, moved into position. Its commander, Fleet Commander Yuna Song, broadcast a message to every ship. All vessels, this is Indomitable. Prepare for departure. Our mission is simple. We are going to save our new friends. We are going to stop the Ravagers. And we are going to show the galaxy what humanity does when someone threatens the innocent. Today we stop being the new species in the galaxy. Today we become the defenders. Let's go to work. The fleet engaged their faster-than-light drives and vanished into the dark. Torvastine stood in silence for a long time after they left. The ambassador finally understood what the Viridians had done. They had come to Earth seeking poets and artists. They had found something much more dangerous. They had found warriors who fought not for glory or conquest, but because they refused to stand by while others suffered. The ambassador did not know if this was hope or horror. Perhaps it was both. The combined fleet traveled for 6 days through faster-than-light space. Human warships flew alongside Viridian crystal vessels. The contrast was stark. The Viridian ships were beautiful and elegant. The human ships were brutal and efficient. Fleet Commander Yuna Song stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, studying the tactical displays. Beside her, Torvastine watched with nervous energy. The crystal being had never been this close to a war zone before. "How do you stay so calm?" the ambassador asked. Yuna smiled slightly. "Training, experience, and understanding that fear is just another form of data. It tells you that something dangerous is coming. Once you accept that, you can work with it instead of against it." The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light at the edge of a system called Kelvin 4. The Viridians had lost contact with their colony here 3 weeks ago. Long-range scans showed why. The planet was covered in Ravagers. Yuna had studied the reports. She had read every account of Ravager attacks. But seeing it in person was different. The creatures swarmed over the surface like insects, consuming everything. Cities were being torn apart piece by piece. The beautiful gardens and art centers that the Viridians had built were being eaten by monsters. There were 2 million people on that planet, Torvastine whispered. Families, children, artists, and teachers and builders. Were? Yuna asked. The Ravagers transmit the screams of those they consume. We heard them for 5 days. Then silence. Yuna's jaw tightened. She had seen war before. She had seen death. But this was different. This was not war. This was extermination. This was hunger given form. The Ravagers detected the fleet. 3 massive hive ships detached from the planet and moved toward them. Each ship was organic, grown rather than built. They pulsed with dark light and dripped acid into space. They looked like nightmares. The Ravager ships began broadcasting on all frequencies. The transmission was not words. It was sounds, screaming, crying. The sounds of beings dying in agony. Underneath it all, a message in broken English. Surrender or be devoured. Resistance is pain. Submission is mercy. Every Viridian on the fleet recoiled. They had heard these transmissions before. They knew what was coming. The psychological assault. The terror. The breaking of will that always came before the physical attack. Yuna listened to the transmission for exactly 5 seconds. Then she muted it. All human vessels, this is Indomitable. The enemy is trying to scare us. Do not listen. Focus on your tasks. Remember your training. She paused. And remember why we are here. Those people on that planet deserved better. We are going to make sure this never happens again. Captain Tae Young commanded the destroyer Perseus. He was 28 years old and had never fired a shot in anger before. When the Ravager transmission started, his hands shook. But then he remembered his training. He remembered the words of his instructor. Fear is fuel. Use it. The Ravagers sent smaller vessels forward. They looked like sharks made of bone and metal and hunger. They expected the human ships to retreat, to try defensive formations to show fear. The human fleet attacked. The Ravagers had never seen this before. Prey did not charge. Prey did not shoot first. Prey did not accelerate directly toward danger with weapons firing. The battle was chaos. Human railguns tore through Ravager bioships. Missiles found weak points that Viridian weapons had missed. The destroyer Perseus flew directly at a Ravager vessel 3 times its size and opened fire at point-blank range, shredding its organic hull. But the Ravagers were not weak. They had consumed 12 civilizations. They had evolved to fight. They adapted quickly. One of the hive ships launched boarding pods at the human cruiser Valiant. The pods punched through the hull and released warrior forms into the corridors. The creatures were 8 feet tall, covered in natural armor, with claws that could cut through steel. They expected to find terrified crew members running and hiding. Instead, they found Marines Lieutenant Minacho had trained for this. Every Marine had trained for this. Boarding actions, close quarters combat, fighting in corridors and rooms where there was no escape. The Ravager warriors rushed forward, expecting easy prey. Mina and her squad opened fire. The sound was deafening in the metal corridors. The Ravagers shrieked and died, but more kept coming. The creatures learned fast. They started using tactics, flanking, trying to overwhelm through numbers. Mina's squad fell back to a narrow corridor where the Ravagers could only come at them 2 at a time. "Hold this position," Mina shouted. "Do not let them through." Her Marines fought with rifles, grenades, combat knives, and eventually their hands when ammunition ran low. The Ravagers had never encountered anything like it. Prey did not fight harder when cornered. Prey did not become more dangerous when wounded. Prey did not look death in the face and spit at it. After 30 minutes of brutal combat, the last Ravager on the Valiant died. Mina stood in a corridor covered in blood and bodies, breathing hard, her rifle empty. She had lost 3 Marines. The rest were wounded. But they had held. "Valiant to indomitable," she reported. "Boarding party eliminated. Ship secure." In space, the battle continued. The human fleet was winning, but the cost was high. The destroyer Horizon took a direct hit to its reactor and exploded. The frigate Damascus lost all power and drifted helpless until another ship could tow it to safety. Over 1,000 people died in the first hour, but the Ravagers were dying faster. Human weapons were more effective than anything the Viridians had used. Human tactics were aggressive and unpredictable. Human crews did not break when things went wrong. They adapted and kept fighting. The lead hive ship tried to retreat. Captain Tae Young had other ideas. He pushed the Perseus to maximum speed and intercepted it. His ship was tiny compared to the massive organic vessel, but he did not care. "All power to forward guns," he ordered. "Target the central mass. Fire everything." The Perseus unleashed every weapon it had. The hive ship's hull cracked open. Atmosphere and fluids vented into space. The massive creature ship convulsed and died. Tae Young spoke calmly into his comm. "Indomitable, this is Perseus. Enemy flagship destroyed." The remaining 2 hive ships broke off and fled. The human fleet let them go. They had achieved their objective. The Ravagers had learned something new. They had learned that humans could hurt them. After the battle, Medical Officer Hee-jin worked 20 hours straight treating the wounded. She moved from bed to bed in the medical bay, saving who she could, comforting those she could not. The cost of victory was high. 4 ships lost, 3,000 casualties, over 1,200 dead, but they had won. For the first time in 300 years, someone had defeated the Ravagers in open battle. Torvastine came to the medical bay. The ambassador moved between the beds, looking at the wounded humans. Some were missing limbs. Some had burns covering their bodies. Some would never fully recover. "Why?" Torvastine asked Hee-jin. "Why do they volunteer to come back?" "I have heard them already. The wounded ones. They want to return to duty. They want to fight again. Why would anyone choose this?" Hee-jin looked up from her work. She was exhausted, covered in blood, and had not slept in a day. "Because it matters. Because someone has to. Because if we do not fight, those things down on that planet will keep killing. They will keep consuming. They will keep spreading until there is nothing left." She returned to her patient, carefully stitching a wound closed. "Humans understand something that maybe your people do not. Sometimes the only way to protect peace is through violence. Sometimes the only way to save lives is to take lives. It is horrible. It is ugly, we hate it. But we do it anyway because the alternative is worse." Yuna called a meeting of all ship commanders. The bridge was crowded with captains and officers, human and Viridian both. She looked at each face, seeing the exhaustion and the determination. "We hurt them today," she said. "We showed them that we can fight. But this was just the beginning. The Ravagers are everywhere. They have consumed entire systems. If we want to stop them, we need to do more than win battles. We need to destroy their ability to make war." She pulled up a tactical map. Intelligence from the Viridians shows that the Ravagers have queens, massive creatures that birth the warrior forms. "If we kill the queens, we can slow them down, maybe stop them entirely." Captain Tae Young leaned forward. "Where are these queens?" "Inside the hive ships. Deep inside, protected by thousands of warriors." The room went quiet. Everyone understood what that meant. Someone would have to board those ships and fight through an army to reach the queens. "It would be suicide. I will lead the mission," Minacho said. She had just come from the medical bay, still wearing her damaged armor. "My Marines and I. We have experience fighting them now." We know their tactics. We can do this. Other voices joined hers, volunteers, dozens of them, people who had just survived one battle and were ready to fight another. Torvastine watched in amazement. The ambassador finally understood what Suji Park had tried to explain back on Mars. Humans were warriors, not because they loved war, but because they loved what they were protecting. They would face any danger, pay any cost to defend those who could not defend themselves. The fleet began preparations for the next phase. Deeper into Ravager territory, hunting the hive ships, finding the queens. The Ravagers had ruled through fear for 3 centuries. Now they were learning fear themselves. The war changed after the Battle of Kelvin 4. The Ravagers had tasted defeat, but they did not understand it. They had never faced an enemy that fought back with such ferocity. They adapted the only way they knew how, by sending more. General Sung Bin commanded the war effort from the new headquarters on Luna. He was 70 years old, with white hair and eyes that had seen too much death. He had fought in 3 wars and studied 1,000 more. He knew that victory required more than bravery. It required strategy. He called it the Earth Doctrine. The principles were simple but brutal. Attack first. Never defend when you can assault. Make the enemy afraid. Force them to react to you instead of the other way around. Most importantly, never fight fair. The Ravagers expect prey, he explained to his staff. They expect defensive positions. They expect fear. We give them the opposite. We attack their bases. We raid their supply lines. We make them chase us. We make them afraid. The doctrine spread through the fleet. Captains who had trained for defensive warfare suddenly became raiders and hunters. Ships that had been designed to protect planets instead went on the offensive, striking deep into Ravager territory. Commander Rena Dao led the Voidwalkers, an elite unit trained for zero-gravity combat in deep space. They wore powered armor that let them survive in the vacuum. They carried weapons designed to punch through organic armor. Their mission was considered impossible by every standard measure. They were going to board a hive ship and kill the queen. Rena gathered her team on the assault carrier Hawk. 15 men and women, all volunteers, all knowing they might not come back. She looked at each face, memorizing them. The mission is simple, she said. We breach the hull. We fight to the queen's chamber. We kill her. We get out. Questions? One of her soldiers, a young woman named Bo Ra, raised her hand. What if we cannot get out? Rena did not lie to them. Then we make sure the queen dies anyway. This is bigger than us. If we succeed, we save millions, maybe billions. That is worth any price. They launched from the Hawk in small assault pods, racing toward a hive ship that was 3 kilometers long. The organic vessel sensed them coming and tried to shoot them down with bioweapons. Most pods made it through. 3 did not. Rena's pod punched through the outer hull and they poured into the hive ship. The interior was a nightmare. Walls made of bone and muscle. Acid dripping from the ceiling. The air was thick and hot and smelled like rotting meat. The warrior forms came immediately. Dozens of them shrieking and charging. The Void Walkers formed a defensive circle and opened fire. Their weapons were designed for this. Explosive rounds, plasma cutters, anything that could kill the heavily armored creatures. The battle was savage. The Ravagers were fast and strong. The Void Walkers were trained and determined. They fought through corridor after corridor, leaving bodies behind them. Bo-Ra took a claw to her shoulder but kept fighting. Another soldier, Quan Sik, lost his left arm but continued to fire his weapon one-handed. They found the Queen's chamber deep in the ship's core. The Queen was massive, the size of a small building, pulsing with dark energy. She was surrounded by hundreds of warrior forms. Set charges on the support structures, Rena ordered. We bring this whole chamber down. Her team moved with precision. They had trained for this exact scenario. Plant explosives. Create a perimeter. Hold until detonation. It sounded simple. It was anything but. The Ravagers threw everything at them. Wave after wave of warriors. Biological weapons that burned through armor. Psychic attacks that tried to break their minds. The Void Walkers held. They fought with rifles, grenades, knives, and eventually their bare hands. Quan Sik died holding a doorway so the others could finish planting charges. Bora fell defending the detonator. One by one, the Void Walkers gave their lives. Rena was the last one standing when the charges were ready. She was wounded in a dozen places. Her armor was cracked and failing. But she reached the detonator. Hawk, this is Rena. Mission accomplished. Tell them we did it. She pressed the button. The explosions tore through the support structures. The Queen's chamber collapsed. The massive creature died, crushed under tons of organic matter. Without the Queen, the hive ship began to fail. The warrior forms became disorganized, confused. They had no guidance, no coordination. Rena did not survive. None of the Void Walkers did, but their sacrifice killed a queen that would have birthed millions more warriors. The tactical value was enormous. The emotional cost was devastating. The pattern repeated across the war. Human forces struck fast and hard, targeting the queens. The Ravagers lost their ability to reproduce quickly. Their numbers started to decline, but they were not defeated. They were angry. The Ravager collective mind, such as it was, made a decision. They would strike at the heart of their enemy. They would destroy Earth itself. Not to consume it. To punish it. To make an example of the species that dared to resist. They gathered the largest force they had ever assembled. 300 hive ships. Tens of millions of warrior forms. Bioweapons that could crack planets. Everything they had all focused on one target. Earth. The warning came from a deep space monitoring station. Ensign Tae-min was running a routine scan when his screens lit up with contacts.
Hundreds of them.
All heading in one direction. This is Station Outpost 7 to Solar Command. We have massive enemy formation inbound. Vector suggests, oh God, they are heading for Earth. Admiral June Sora received the report at Solar Defense Command. She was in charge of protecting humanity's home system. It was a job she had never expected to do in practice. Earth had not been threatened since the Colonial Rebellion. She looked at the tactical display showing the incoming Ravager fleet. 300 ships. More firepower than had ever been assembled in human history. All coming for her homeworld. She could have felt fear. She could have felt despair. Instead, she felt anger. All commands, this is Admiral Sora, General Mobilization. Every ship, every station, every weapon platform. We draw the line here. They want Earth? They will have to go through every single one of us first. The Solar Defense Fleet began to assemble. It was not as large as the Ravager force, but it was fighting for home. Every ship, every soldier, every pilot knew what was at stake. This was not a battle in some distant system. This was for Earth, for their families, for their species. The Viridians heard about the threat. Torvastine contacted the United Earth Council immediately. We will help, the ambassador said. Every ship we have. Every resource. You saved us. Now we will stand with you. Chancellor Daewon accepted gratefully. The Viridian fleet, what remained of it, joined the human forces. Crystal ships and steel warships together, forming a defensive line between the Ravagers and Earth. On Earth itself, billions of people looked up at the sky. They knew what was coming. They knew the danger. But they also knew that humanity had never surrendered, never given up, never stopped fighting when it mattered. In cities across the planet, people gathered. Not to panic, not to riot, but to wait. To trust in their defenders. To believe that the warriors standing between them and the darkness would hold. Captain Binna Kang, back on Earth after months in space, stood with her family and soul. Her children held her hands tightly. Will the fleet win? Her daughter asked. Binna looked up at the stars, thinking of all the people she had served with. The brave captains, the determined soldiers, the pilots who flew into danger without hesitation. She thought of Rena Dahl and the Void Walkers. She thought of every human who had died fighting the Ravagers. Yes, she said, they will win because they are fighting for us. And humans never give up when fighting for what they love. In orbit, Admiral Sora broadcast one final message before the battle. It went to every ship, every station, every person who could hear it. The enemy thinks they can scare us by threatening our home. They think we will surrender to save our planet. They are wrong. We are humans. We do not surrender. We do not give up. We do not run. They want Earth? Then let them come. We will teach them the most important lesson they will ever learn. There are some species you should never threaten. There are some fights you cannot win. And there is no force in this galaxy stronger than humans defending their home. The Ravager fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. 300 hive ships blotting out the stars. They broadcast their standard message of terror and doom. The human fleet did not respond with words. They responded with actions. Every weapon in the solar system opened fire. The final battle for Earth had begun. The Battle of Sol lasted 6 weeks. It was the longest, bloodiest, most desperate fight humanity had ever known. The Ravagers came with everything they had, determined to crush the species that dared to resist. They found something they had never encountered before, a species willing to pay any price to survive. The first week was chaos. 300 Ravager hive ships against 150 human vessels and 60 Viridian craft. The math did not favor Earth, but humans did not fight with math. They fought with fury. Admiral June Sora commanded from the flagship Defiant. She had been a tactical officer for 30 years. She knew every trick, every maneuver, every desperate gambit that might work. She used them all. All ships, this is Defiant. Pattern Delta. Do not give them a stable target. Keep moving.
Keep firing.
Make them chase us. The human fleet scattered into smaller groups, forcing the Ravagers to divide their forces. Each group targeted a different hive ship, focusing fire until it died, then moving to the next. It was working, but slowly. Too slowly. The Ravagers adapted. They started targeting the orbital defense stations around Earth, massive platforms with weapons powerful enough to destroy continents. If the stations fell, Earth would be defenseless. Station Guardian 7, where this had all started with Commander Hyun Tae, came under direct assault. 3 hive ships focused their fire on it. The station's shields held for 30 minutes. Then they failed. Hyun Tae knew what was coming. He could evacuate. He could save his crew. But if the station fell, the Ravagers would have a clear shot at the planet below. All hands, this is the commander. Abandon ship. Get to the escape pods. That is an order. His crew refused to leave. Every single one of them stayed at their posts. They knew what they were choosing. They chose it anyway. Then we make this count, Hyun Tae said quietly. Overload the reactor. When they get close enough, we take them with us. The 3 hive ships closed in, expecting an easy kill. Guardian 7 waited until they were almost touching. Then Hyun Tae pressed the button. The nuclear explosion was visible from Earth. 3 hive ships and 1 orbital station died together in a flash of light that lit up the night sky. The people on the ground watched and wept, knowing what it meant. Brave people had just given their lives to protect them. The battle raged on. In the asteroid belt, human forces used the rocks as weapons, launching them at Ravager ships with mass drivers. Near Jupiter, a squadron of fighters led by pilot Yuna drew a dozen hive ships into the gas giant's gravity well, destroying them all. Yuna's fighter was lost in the attack. She was 23 years old. Week 2 brought the boarding assaults. The Ravagers learned from their previous failures. They sent bigger warrior forms, more of them, better coordinated. They managed to board the cruiser Invincible. Colonel Huan Jia commanded the Marine detachment on the Invincible. She had trained her whole life for this moment. When the Ravager boarding pods punched through the hull, she was ready. All Marines, this is Colonel Jia. They are in our home now. Show them what happens to things that invade our territory. The fighting was brutal and personal. Corridor by corridor, room by room, the Marines gave ground slowly, making the Ravagers pay for every meter. Huanjia led from the front, her rifle never stopping, her voice never faltering. A warrior form the size of a small car cornered her in a narrow hallway. She was out of ammunition, her combat knife broken. She should have died. Instead, she grabbed a piece of broken pipe and used it as a club, beating the creature until it stopped moving. The Invincible's crew fought for 18 hours straight. When the last Ravager died, the ship was a wreck. Half the crew was dead or wounded, but they had held. Week 3 brought the bioweapons. The Ravagers released clouds of engineered viruses, acids that could eat through ship hulls, weapons designed to kill from the inside. The human medical teams worked around the clock, developing countermeasures, treating the infected, saving who they could. Medical Officer Hee-jin had not slept in days. She moved from patient to patient, her hands steady even when her vision blurred from exhaustion. When the Ravager bioweapon hit her ship, she developed an antidote in 4 hours. It saved 3,000 lives. She died of exposure 2 days later, having spent so much time treating others that she could not save herself. Week 4 saw the arrival of reinforcements. Every human colony, every outpost, every ship that could fly came to Earth's defense. They came from Mars, from the outer planets, from mining stations in deep space. They were not trained soldiers. They were miners, traders, engineers. But they came anyway. The Ravagers had never seen anything like it. Prey did not reinforce. Prey did not sacrifice themselves for others. Prey ran and hid and died alone. These humans kept coming, kept fighting, kept dying with their hands around Ravager throats. By week 5, both sides were exhausted. The Ravagers had lost over 100 hive ships. The human fleet was down to 60 operational vessels. The orbital defenses were in ruins. Both forces were running on determination alone. That was when the Ravagers made their final push. They sent their flagship, a hive ship 300 kilometers long, directly toward Earth. It carried the oldest, largest queen in their collective. If it reached the planet, it could birth enough warriors to consume the entire surface in days. Admiral Sora watched it come. She had 30 ships left that could fight. It would not be enough. All available vessels form up on Defiant. We are going to stop that ship. Captain Wu Bin commanded the destroyer Hammer. His ship had taken heavy damage in the previous battles. The engines were failing. The weapons were nearly depleted. He should have retreated for repairs. Instead, he plotted an intercourse course Hammer to Defiant. I am going to ram the flagship. Give me covering fire. Negative, Hammer. Your crew. Already evacuated, Admiral. It is just me now. Tell my family I love them. Wu Bin pushed his ship to maximum speed. The damaged engine screamed in protest but held. He flew directly at the massive flagship, dodging fire, ignoring the damage, focused only on his target. The hammer struck the flagship's reactor core at full speed. The explosion tore through the hive ship like a knife through paper. The flagship broke apart, the ancient queen dying in the vacuum of space. With the queen's death, something changed. The Ravager collective mind, which had coordinated their attacks for centuries, suddenly fractured. The warrior forms became confused. The hive ships lost cohesion. They had never fought without central coordination. Admiral Sora saw the chaos in their ranks and seized the moment. All ships, this is Defiant. They are breaking. Push forward. End this now. The human fleet, battered and bleeding but unbroken, charged. The Viridian ships followed, their crystal hulls glowing with fierce light. Together they hit the disorganized Ravager forces like a hammer. The final battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Ravager fleet was destroyed. A few ships escaped into faster-than-light travel, fleeing back to whatever darkness had spawned them. The rest were debris floating in the space around Earth. The surviving human ships hung in orbit, their crews too exhausted to celebrate. They had won, but the cost was staggering. Over 100,000 dead, 60 ships destroyed. Earth's orbital infrastructure in ruins, but Earth survived. Humanity survived. On the surface, people emerged from shelters and looked up at the sky. They saw the wreckage. They saw the surviving ships. They saw the stars still shining, still there. In cities across the world, people wept, not from fear, from relief, from pride, from gratitude for the warriors who had stood between them and annihilation. 6 months later, the United Earth Council held a ceremony. Representatives from every nation, every colony, every species that had fought gathered on Luna Station. Torvastine stood before the council one last time. The Viridian ambassador had changed during the war. The crystal being's light was dimmer now, marked by what had been witnessed. But it was also steadier, stronger. We came to you seeking peace, Torvastine said. We were naive. We thought peace was simply the absence of war. You taught us the truth. Peace is not given. It is built. It is defended. It is earned through the sacrifice of those willing to stand against the darkness. The ambassador gestured to the memorial wall behind the council. It stretched for a kilometer, covered in names. Human names. Viridian names. Every person who had died in the war. We studied your culture and saw your art, your music, your poetry. We thought we understood you. We did not. Your art exists because you know what it costs to protect it. Your music is beautiful because you have heard the silence of death. Your poetry moves hearts because it is written by people who have stared into the abyss and refused to blink. Chancellor Daewon rose. He was older now, grayer, marked by the war like everyone else, but his eyes were clear. You gave us a gift, Ambassador. You gave us purpose. For 200 years we prepared for war but hoped it would never come. You showed us why we prepared. Not for conquest, not for glory, but to protect those who cannot protect themselves. He looked out at the gathered representatives. Humanity will never seek war, but we will never run from it either. We are artists and warriors, poets and soldiers. We create beauty and we defend it. This is who we are. This is who we will always be. In the crowd, Binna Kang stood with her children. Her daughter tugged her hand. Will there be more wars, Mother?